As we were building a theater audience, we also were building a Black dance audience because Black folks would go see dance every other year when they brought Alvin Ailey in. And so as we began to build a Black dance audience, the major funder for us, which was the State Arts Council, decided that because they were now interested, that the major dance presenter could do a better job of bringing those companies in than us. And so they cut our dance funding.
You're listening to Building Our Own Tables, a podcast produced for HowlRound Theater Commons, a free and open platform for theater makers worldwide. I'm your host, Yura Sapi, founder of multiple organizations, including Liberarte, a nonprofit nurturing artists for liberated futures, Protectores de la Tierra, a farm and food sovereignty initiative based out of Colombia, Balística, an LGBTQ+ healing and art space for communities in Latin America, and through all my programs, workshops, coaching, and this podcast, I've helped countless founders and leaders unleash their brilliance and build thriving movements. In this podcast, we share visionary solutions, stories, and snapshots to support you as a leader on your own journey of creation and transformation. This 5th season is especially meaningful. I'm recording while 8 months pregnant, and this experience of bringing new life into the world has brought a deeper opportunity for lessons in leadership, in legacy, and in creation, all of which I'm sharing in this season alongside the powerful voices you'll hear from. You'll hear from extraordinary founders building their own tables for their communities, their lineages, and for the planet in this evolutionary time. You are here for a reason, and I'm honored to be on this journey with you. So stay tuned and enjoy. And you'll see just how free our world can truly be. Welcome to the Building Our Own Tables podcast, pulling up a seat to our liberation. Today, it's an honor to be joined by Ron Himes, founder of the Black Rep. Thank you so much for being with us today, Ron.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Excited for this conversation.
Likewise. I am super excited to hear about your journey, especially you founded the Black Rep in St. Louis, Missouri in 1976 while a student at Washington University, where you graduated with a degree in business administration. And then since then have produced, directed more than 200 plays at the Black Rep, including all 10 plays written by August Wilson. Amazing. And the Black Rep, just more info on that organization. So you are committed to reproducing, reimagining, commissioning works written by Black playwrights, creating opportunities for new voices and youth, and this understanding of how you're creating an equitable distribution of opportunities and resources for Black professionals and students in theater, the improved representation on stage, backstage, and then also creating this community culture of support and mentorship. Amazing work. I'm really excited to learn more about everything. I'd love to start off by hearing about that inception story. So take us back to that moment.
Actually, it all started prior to 1976. 1976 was actually when I incorporated the company. There was a student organization while I was an undergraduate at Washington University. I was not a theater major, but I had friends, of course, who were. And they were Black students who were not being cast in main stage productions by the theater department, primarily because the theater department wasn't producing any work by Black writers, and many times just couldn't figure out what to do with those Black students in the plays that they were producing. And needless to say, those students, my friends, spent a lot of time complaining about their plight, complaining about the lack of opportunities, complaining about not being an integral part of the theater department. and being very political at the time because I had been actually hanging out on the campus as a youth. And I was in high school, actually, when the Black students took over the administration building in 1968 and was really politicized from my exposure to being on campus and the work that the Black students were doing in the Association of Black Collegians. And so I said to my friends, stop complaining. You all are really ruining a lot of parties and a lot of good time, complaining always about your plight. So if the theater department is not going to put on plays that you can be part of, if they're not going to cast you in the plays that they're doing, you should just start doing your own plays. And we are students. We pay tuition, and that means that we should have access to the facilities. And so we formed a student group, and in those days we began to have rap sessions about how we were going to bring this about. And so there were those friends of mine who were theater majors, then in came some dance majors, some creative writing people, some English department people, and we just began to meet on a regular basis and talk about putting this company together. And so the student group was actually called the Phoenix Theater Troupe. And the first play we produced was a play by Ed Bullins called The Gentleman Caller, which we produced in the formal lounge of the women's building on campus. And we just began to regularly apply to use different facilities, different buildings on campus. And we continued to regularly produce work. A lot of the work initially was collages of poetry, prose, and music. And as I said, we produced that work on a very regular basis, began to build a bit of a reputation, then began to get invitations from other campuses, Black student union groups and Black collegiate groups from other campuses. And so we, for a Martin Luther King program or Malcolm X Memorial or some Black History Month celebration, we would get together, we'd put together a collage of poetry, prose, and music, and we'd go perform it. Eventually, that began to grow and go out into the community, into like churches, community centers. But then after a while, that core group had either matriculated, some had lost interest. The fortunate or unfortunate thing for me was the contact information for the Phoenix Theater Troupe was my phone number. And so at a time when most of the other people had lost interest or dropped out, as I said, it was myself and a sister named Geraldine Cole who kept the Phoenix Theater Troupe going, and until she graduated ultimately and moved back to Kansas City, where she was from. But still, on occasion, I would get calls for Black History Month program, Martin Luther King memorials. And I would get on the phone and call people and say, hey, we got a show in 2 weeks. Can you come rehearse? We're going to put something together for a Martin Luther King program, or we're going to put something together for a Malcolm X memorial. We just got a call. And we operated that way for a while. Eventually, there were occasions when there were a Black faculty member who had an appointment in the theater department and a co-appointment in the African-American Studies department, which was actually just the African-American Studies department. And it actually wasn't a department at the time. It was the Black Studies program. And at Washington University, it was the Black Studies program for 50 years. It was 50 years before the Black Studies program became a department. But when there was a Black faculty member, they would on occasion get to produce or direct a play by a Black writer. Mm-hmm. And on a dare by my two good friends, Geraldine and Marcia House at the time, I auditioned for a play because I was not a theater major and had no real interest in theater other than as an observer and a patron. I auditioned for No Place to Be Somebody and got cast in it, and had a good time doing it and was pretty good. And so I did a couple of more of their sort of like student projects, thesis projects. And when I graduated, finally, I decided that I didn't want to be an accountant. Theater was fun. And so let me give it a try and see if I can make that work. And so I continued to pursue acting opportunities with local theater companies, community theater companies. and all along keeping the Phoenix Theater Troupe going when I got a call. Eventually, I went to incorporate the Phoenix Theater Troupe, and there was some company or something in the state that was already registered as the Phoenix something. So I couldn't have that name. And so I incorporated the Phoenix Theater Troupe as the St. Louis Black Repertory Company. Now, take a step back. So the Phoenix Theater Troupe, basically, the name came about because in one of my marketing classes, we had a simulation assignment where we had to create a company and talk about why we. And so I developed this theater company in this simulated marketing exercise. And so part of my reasoning was the company was named the Phoenix Theater Troupe after the mythical bird, the phoenix that rises from his own ashes. But I also said that we would name it the Phoenix Theater Troupe because people would think we were from out of town and that we were touring and happened to be in St. Louis. And
okay,
that
business marketing strategy.
You got to see us before we leave town. It's the Phoenix Theater Troupe. But then, as I said, when it became time to incorporate, that name was not available. And so I incorporated once again, my logic being that if we call the company the St. Louis Black Repertory Company, surely being naive and idealistic, the city will embrace and support us. And so in 1976, the Phoenix Theater Troupe was incorporated as the St. Louis Black Repertory Company.
Firstly, your story, it sounds so familiar because for me as well, it was in these college undergraduate days, talking with other people of different marginalized identities, racial identities, gender, cultures, realizing that we're not seeing the representation, we're not experiencing the representation, we're not being taught by people who, look like us. And so wanting to be that change. And then I also had a class where we were to create a company. It was a theater company. It was a theater management class. And so that really also was part of that initial spark that had me dream about it, that then now it's like, I just have to keep creating. But I'm very curious about this business background that you bring, because it seems like you've been able to really harness some of the things that can be helpful about knowing business.
What I was able to do, and probably back then not realizing that I was doing it, that from a lot of my business courses, I just took away things that seemed to be useful to me in my life, not necessarily things that were leading me to a career in the business field and the business world. I was an undergraduate for a long time, and I had many majors. And so I spent a lot of time finding myself and finding my path. I say I started school as pre-med. For a while, I was pre-law. For a while, I studied philosophy. For a while, I studied Eastern philosophy and Eastern religions. For a while, I studied psychology. And then after a while, I took some business courses. And I was able, being on scholarship, that I was able to flit around from subject to subject, from major to major. And actually, for a long time, not actually declaring a major, but reaching the point where finally I had an advisor say, look, you better get out of here. And you need to declare a major and buckle down and get out of here. And so it just happened at that point, I had the most credits toward my degree in business administration. So I completed my coursework to be able to graduate with a degree, a BSBA, Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. But I had been a big patron of the arts. I tell people that I probably started going to Washington University when I was about 13 years old. Me and the group of guys that I grew up with who hung out in the neighborhood at the neighborhood church played basketball, and our coaches happened to come from the WashU campus YMCA. And the first year we had a white guy from New York who didn't know anything about basketball. He was a fraternity boy coming to do some missionary work in the community. And we just lost a lot of games, didn't have a lot of fun. But occasionally, on a couple of occasions, actually, he took us on campus to the frat house. And so we were these novelty, these little black boys running around. But the next year, we had a coach who was a brother from North Philly, who also happened to be the president of the Association of Black Collegians, really came to redirect us. And so after practices, after games, he would take us to campus, but he would take us to the campus side of where the black students hung out. And so we began to hang out on campus regularly. I did especially. We would go to lectures. We would go to conferences. I was still in high school when I heard Bobby Seale speak on campus, Julian Bond speak on campus, saw Sonia Sanchez read on campus, Nikki Giovanni on campus. And I was exposed to a lot of culture, a lot of cultural experiences. In high school, I was in an honors program where, of course, those students we got to go to the symphony and to the art museum, to the theater. And I remember going to the repertory theater. It was actually called the Loretta Hilton Theater at the time, which was the white regional theater in town, to see some 17th century restoration comedy that was just didn't touch me at all, didn't speak to me at all. And I'm like, oh, I don't like theater at all. But then once we became exposed and used the National Black Theater, Barbara Ann Tier brought her company to campus. The Negro Ensemble Company was touring, and I got to see the River Knot ceremonies and Dark Old Men. I'm like, oh, this is different. I like this. Know those people. I recognize those people. And then there was in St. Louis a group called the Black Artist Group, BAG. And it was a conglomeration of artists, musicians primarily, but there were also dancers. They also had a theater component. And so I always saw them when they performed and actually began to hang out with those guys who were older, but spent a lot of time on the campus and exposed me to a lot of music, a lot of literature. For a while in high school, I would play hooky from high school because somebody was giving a lecture on campus. Lecture, or I wanted to hear the lecture, or in the evening would go to campus. I remember Charlie Mingus played on campus in Graham Chapel and got to meet him and listen to his music. So it was that exposure that gave wide breadth cultural awareness. And the other thing that I noticed is that a lot of the guys who I hung out with from like age 12, 13 through high school, who were not in the honors program like I was, they never saw a play. And some of them never saw a play until we started the theater company. And so that was also one of the reasons that exposing young people to theater became so important to me. And that was a vital part of how we began, because, of course, it was a lot easier to produce and present theater for young people, for families, without a facility, without a real stage. We could put on a performance for kids in the streets, in a church basement, anywhere. And just realized early on from my lack of exposure as a kid, how important it could be to expose young people to the arts, to expose young people to Black theater, particularly Black kids, at as early an age as possible. And that's always been a vital part of my work at the Black Rep and a big commitment of the work we do here.
It sounds like that from high school experience through college, through Washington University, that supported you so much, really gave you that inspiration and gave you that the seeing of different people, of different artists, of different groups that showed you that something else was possible. Is probably why it was so easy for you to tell your friends, we can do it. We could create our own thing. These people have. Let's talk about those early years, especially going back to now when you incorporated and are now in the community, trying to make an impact, be known, while also doing what you said you want to do about helping young people get access to the arts at an early age. You mentioned that, the name you chose, you felt that would be embraced by the community. Tell us how that panned out. How did that come through over the years.
After a while, I produced a work by Charles Fuller called The Brownsville Raid. And I rented a space in the city and produced a play for 2 weekends, 2 or 3 weekends. And one of the final performances, this couple waited for me after the performance and said to me that we had really enjoyed the play. We have a space that we think you might be interested in. You should come see it next week. And so I did. They were the directors of a facility called the Greeley Community Center. And the Greeley Community Center was the outreach program of the Greeley Presbyterian Church. However, the church had left the community, but the community center was still there. And the community center was using the church sanctuary as a skating rink. And the back half of the building was the community center, where they did youth programming. They were a food bank way back then. And they said, if you like this space, you can have it. All we want you to do is teach theater to the kids in the community. And we're like, great. After the production of the Brownsville Raid in 1981, we moved into the Greeley Presbyterian Church and renamed it the 23rd Street Theater, because it was on the corner of 23rd Street and St. Louis Avenue. And it finally became known as the Miracle on 23rd Street. So having a facility allowed us to be able to plan a season. And so we opened our first full season in 1981. We produced 4 plays. We would do 6 months of theater. We had a dance company. We did 3 major dance concerts. And because we had a facility now, we became this cultural clearinghouse. So we showed Black independent films some nights. We had open mic nights, spoken word nights. We had cabaret nights. And so we were just constantly programming in this facility where we were now in residence. We had an identity. We had a facility, and we had no bills. So we were able to pretty much do what we wanted to do with limited or little to no real resources. And we were in residence at the 23rd Street Theater for 10 years, from 1981 to 1991. We produced a lot of work there. And as I mentioned, we had a theater company that went from 4 plays to 5 or 6 plays a year, and basically a theater season that ran 6 months, and then a dance company. We would produce 3 major dance concerts a year. We eventually went on to present small to mid-sized Black dance companies. So during those days, we brought in Philadanco, we brought in Diane McIntyre, we brought in the Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, we brought in the Nuba Dance Company from San Francisco. As we were building a theater audience, we also were building a Black dance audience, because Black folks would go see dance every other year when they brought Alvin Ailey in. And so as we began to build a Black dance audience, the major funder for us, which was the State Arts Council, decided that because they were now interested, that the major dance presenter could do a better job of bringing those companies in than us. And so they cut our dance funding. And that was okay. So we just pivoted and put more energy into the theater company, into producing theater. We became the first Black company in the Midwest to operate with an equity contract. And so we just poured all our energy into becoming the best theater company that we could become.
Before we get further into this episode, go ahead and hit subscribe on this podcast. This is the best way to stay updated on new episodes, and it helps spread the word to other visionaries who are making a positive impact on the world. So go ahead and hit subscribe, and let's keep this good energy going. Let's chat about that challenge too. So I know you said it was okay to lose the funding, but I think it is a common theme today in our time of everything that's going on with the NEA and funding, to lose funding. And to how do you get to that point where it's okay? Was that immediate for you, or do you think that you did have to grow into the opportunity of what losing funding could be?
I think that it was okay because we weren't really dependent upon funding. I think that even like today, I think with major cultural institutions, not of color, not of particular cultural perspectives, we, in many instances, were never receiving the kind of funding or support that we became dependent upon. We were always, and still to this day, are funded at a level that allows us to survive and not really thrive. So we were always in survival mode.
Yeah.
And if losing a little bit of funding over here meant that the best thing to do was to cut that programming so that we could continue to survive, that was a shift that we made. The one thing that we had going for us, however, was that from our days as a student group, we had built a core of our core audience that sort of followed us. So if we were doing work on campus, there was a group of students who, our friends, our buddies, who came to see everything we did. If we went to another campus, they showed up at that campus. If we wound up doing something at a community center or a community location, they showed up there. And so
Yeah.
when we got the facility at 23rd Street, we had already had a core. That core began to grow more and more. And so we always have had a solid base of community support. Now, it's not the same kind of support as the major dance presenter or the white regional theater or the art museum. It's not a patron base that is writing big checks, that is supporting or underwriting programming, but there was an audience who thought the work that we was doing was important, and it was important for them to be there to support it at the level that they could support it. So that's how we managed. And to this day, like I said, we were on St. Louis Avenue from 1981 to 1991. And I still run into people now who say, I've been with you since the St. Louis Avenue days. When somebody says that to me, I know that they go back 30 years or 40 years of supporting the theater. And though it hasn't been, as I said, major funding, major foundation funding, huge gifts from individuals who could write big checks, it wasn't that. It still isn't that. We have never had and still don't have an individual donor who's making a six-figure contribution as some major institutions do. But we have a bevy of donors and supporters who give all they can to support. Sometimes that's $50, sometimes that's $100, sometimes it's $1,000. But it's consistent and it's given in a way that lets us know that the work we're doing is important and that the work we're doing is vital to the community.
Yeah, it sounds like through this acknowledgement, this gratitude, this appreciation, richness of what you do have, of course, in the donations that are coming in, and then also the particular aspect of who is it that's coming and the energy that they're giving beyond the funding, the love and the support. Are there any other tips you have around how you've been able to operate more from this place of abundance than falling into that scarcity mindset?
We've had the kind of support that has allowed us to continue to do the work that we do, to continue to elevate the work that we do, continue to raise the bar in terms of production values, in terms of getting to a point where we were able to start paying artists in a way that we were able to put full-time staff in place in a way that allowed us to build the kind of reputation and the body of work so that now we also now receive some national foundation support, which has been important. That support, grant from a national foundation, also opens up some doors locally, right? It's, you get a grant from the Schubert Foundation? I was like, yes. And so it's, we should be supporting you. It's like, yes, I think you should. And we're grateful that you will. We have learned to not spend money that we don't have. And we have learned to not be dependent upon a gift returning year after year. We take what we get, we earn as much as we can. When you look at the ratio of major corporate institutions or major cultural institutions who may operate on a 30% earned revenue, 70% contributed, right? We never had that kind of ratio. We've never had to worry about that kind of ratio. So again, as I said, when that funding or support goes away, then that means they've got to cut programming. They've got to cut staff. We never were and still are not so dependent upon support in a way that we've made investments that we could not sustain without that continued funding. What we've done is when we are fortunate enough to get support, when we are fortunate enough to get an increase, when we're fortunate enough to find a new foundation who's interested in our work or a new individual donor who might be interested in sponsoring or underwriting a program, we take that for that time and we do the work that we do with that additional support. But we don't build a future or project a future on the continuation of that gift.
I would love to hear actually more on the programs that you're mentioning and the evolution of over the years, what you've been able to start to bring in the productions, the performances, the representation on stage, backstage. But also at the beginning, I had shared about how there's these programs for more equitable distribution of opportunities and resources for Black professionals and students in theater. What could that look like? What has that been looking like as you've been evolving?
We've been fortunate enough to produce a body of work that has attracted talented, experienced designers and directors who want to come to St. Louis to work at the Black Rep because of the work that we do. There are a lot of the first generation folk who were at the Black Rep who moved on to the Broadway and film and television, or either into teaching, or who left the field, or who are working at some of the other larger professional theaters in town. So then it became a matter of, okay, how do we continue to develop talent? We know we've got a place to showcase the talent, but how do we begin to continue to develop it? So then we began to look for the next generation of Black Rep artists. And we also have always, as I said, looked at youth. So one of the ways that we've done is we have a program now that's probably almost 20 years old. We have a teen tech program. So we train teenagers in technical theater. And as a matter of fact, teenagers work on or run a lot of our main stage shows. We train teenagers to run the light board, to run the soundboard, to run props, to run costume. And some of them have gone on to college and majored in theater. Some have majored in tech theater. Some have majored in stage management and then come back. So that's been one of the ways that we've continued to develop and to invest in the field. We have a professional intern program, which are young folks who have completed undergraduate degrees who come here for a full-time paid internship. Now, again, like with our professional artists, they're not paid enough to go live the high life while they're continuing to develop their craft. But there are a lot of places where they would have to go pay to be an intern. They'd have to pay to be a fellow at some other theaters. And so we have provided opportunities, and our intern program is approaching probably 25, 30 years old. That professional internship is the transition from academia to a career in the theater. And we've found that a lot of those people have gone on to work professionally, to have successful careers in the theater. Those professional interns who come into the theater are the same people who do most of our work in our education department. So they now are teaching young people. They now are taking the shows that we do into the schools. They now are working with the teen tech program. And so they have an opportunity to grow, to develop in craft. Many of them who come to us, some of them who come to us from PWIs have the same issues that the group of students at WashU had. They have a degree in theater, 4 years of majoring in theater, and they don't have a resume. They don't have 6 shows on their resume. They don't have any major roles on their resume. And so it becomes very important that they have a place like the Black Rep that they can come to, that they can have acting opportunities. And if they come to us as an acting intern, they have to learn everything. So they train in the box office. They train in running shows. They ASM shows. They work in the shop. It really becomes a conservatory situation for them, where my feeling and our feeling is that if you're not going to have a career as an actor, you will get the training here that if you want to stay in theater, there are other areas that you can work in because you've been exposed to them. You've had an opportunity to work and develop in them. Right now, we have a young lady who, I think Christina's been with us 4 years now, going on 5. She came as an acting intern. She's now the associate development person. So she's still acting, but she's also writing grants. She's writing proposals. She's doing individual donor development. And so when she's not acting, an acting opportunity, she still has a paycheck in theater. We've also worked with a number of young playwrights. Probably produced 24, 25 world premieres. A lot of those shows have been plays with young playwrights. Sometimes it's been their first play, but then sometimes it's been host of senior playwrights who were vital during the Negro Ensemble Company day, who found a second home, as it were, here at the Black Rep. People like Leslie Lee and Samuel Williams and Ron Milner and Bill Harris, among a few, who reproduced world premieres of their work in later stage in their career. And so we continue to not only work very hard to keep the canon of African American literature alive, but we work very hard to continue to contribute to that canon of African American literature for the American stage.
So powerful. It sounds like such a vibrant hub for creatives, for creation, for legacy. It's like ringing with this energy of the social capital, of not just focusing on the dollar sign or the financials, but everything that we talk about with mission-based work, impact and reputation and the stories and the actual results of what we're doing, especially in this nonprofit kind of space.
Yeah, and part of that, speaking to the body of work, has been great as we were developing audience, as we continued to develop audience for a period of time in terms of dramatic work. That was work that people primarily knew that came out of the Negro Ensemble Company. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about works like The River Niger, Ceremonies in Darko Men, Zoo Man and the Sign, The Soldier's Play, and all of that sort of rich body of work that came out of those years, 40, 50 years of the Negro Ensemble Company developing work and us being able to produce some of that work. The reality is, outside of New York, if the play was not on Broadway, then people don't know it, right? And so we were able to develop a trust with our audience that they were comfortable going wherever we take them. So we could do new work. We could do plays. We could do titles that they didn't know. After we exhausted all of the sort of Black Broadway musicals that they knew, then we could start doing different kinds of work. We could try to develop new musical. We could produce new musical work, and had built a trust and an audience that would go where we take them. And that's one of the ways we've been able to produce as many world premieres as we have. One of the shows that tickles me the most that audiences talked about, we did a production of Waiting for Godot. And they're a group of season ticket holders from years and years back who every time they see me, they still want to talk about, man, what was that play about? What were you doing? But we've done a half a dozen Shakespeare's. We've done some Tennessee Williams. We've done I'm Not Rappaport. And here's an interesting thing. Most companies, when you see a production of I'm Not Rappaport, it has one Black actor in it, right? Midge, the two old guys. One's a Jewish guy and one's a Black guy. But the play is set in Central Park. So how could you have a play set in Central Park and you only see one Black person? There's a character in the play who just happens to be called the cowboy, who is a drug dealer. couldn't that guy be black? There's an art student who sits up on the bridge sketching all day who owes money to the drug dealer. Couldn't she be black? And so it's a matter of the lens through which we look at plays. We did Romeo and Juliet, the Montagues and the Capulets. They were the nonviolent civil rights people, and they were the Black Panther militants. That was the difference, right? Nobody ever knows what started the fight between the Capulets and the Montagues. We just know that there were some major ideological differences that these two families could not allow these two star-crossed lovers to be, right? And Romeo and his boys, when they go courting Juliet, they sang My Girl. That Juliet's ball was the stroll, the Madison, at a backyard picnic. We have audience who say it was never as clear as this interpretation that we've done. And so I think that lens and perspective in terms of the work that we've done has been so very important. And I think that's one of the things that Black theater and theaters of color are able to do. We're able to tell stories in a way that speaks to a community that in many instances is not directly addressed. And it just goes back to what W.E.B. Du Bois says, theater for, by, and about us.
Yes. So you've gone through such a prolific history and build-up, evolution. What are you dreaming into being now? What's the future that you're building towards?
We are on the verge of starting season 49. We are beginning to plan the 50th anniversary. And I am dreaming and planning that we will break ground on our own facility during our 50th anniversary.
Yeah. May it be, so it is. And one final offering, what advice would you offer someone just beginning to build their own table?
Be very clear and specific about what your goals are. Don't compromise. And forward motion is progress.
How can we stay updated with you, the Black Rep?
We try to keep our website up to date. We're very active on all our social media. Again, that's the joy and the excitement of having these young fellows, these young interns, these young teens. They keep us up on social media when I'm like, I don't know what, but they keep us up. So we're on all social media platforms, but our website generally has all the information that we're doing, and you can keep up with me and with the Black Rep through our social media.
Thank you, Ron Himes, the Black Rep. Such a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This podcast is produced as a contribution to HowlRound Theater Commons. You can find more episodes of this show and any HowlRound show wherever you find podcasts, including non-commercial open source apps like Anytime Podcast Player for iPhone and AntennaPod for Android. If you loved this podcast, please share it with your friends. You can find a transcript for this episode, along with lots of other progressive and disruptive content on howlround.com. Have an idea for a meaningful podcast, essay, or TV event the theater community needs to hear? Visit howlround.com and submit your ideas to this knowledge commons. Thanks for pulling up a seat to liberation with us at Building Our Own Tables. Catch you next time. And you'll see